Today I am going to discuss about exception handling in C#.NET. So first of all, let us discuss what is exception. So when we write .NET code and execute, how many types of error occurrence, so we will discuss now. So in .NET actually, when we write the code and execute, so you may get three types of error occurrence. One is syntactical errors, next one is compilation errors, next one is runtime errors. So when we are going to write programming part in .NET, or when we are going to execute that, we may get three different types of error occurrences: syntactical errors, compilation errors, runtime errors. Syntactical errors means these errors occurs when we miss some double quotes, or when we miss termination, or when we miss some brackets. So these are syntactically wrong. So or else when we miss spelled with syntax, syntactically we miss some spelling mistakes. So in that case we get these errors, that is called syntactical errors. So these errors do not cause any harm to the program execution, and syntactical errors easily can be identified and rectified by the programmer while typing the code. So compilation errors means same errors whatever it is happened with syntactically, that errors can be occurred at the time of compilation. So these errors are called compilation errors. Compilation errors also do not cause any harm to the program execution. So compilation errors also can be identified and rectified easily by the programmer at the time of compilation. So syntactical errors, compilation errors do not cause any harm to the program execution. So with these errors, nothing can be harm to the program execution. So when it comes to runtime errors, runtime error is nothing but what here? So actually runtime error is nothing but what? Exception. Runtime error is nothing but exception. So when we will get this type of error occurrence, for example, whenever we try to connect to database, so if you would like to connect to database, then we should give user ID and password. If we miss user ID and password, some mistakes, then with wrong user ID and password, when we try to connect with database, at that time you may get a runtime error, that is exception. Or else when we try to create a object for abstract class or interface, at that time also you may get runtime errors. These are the just examples when we get runtime errors. So runtime error is nothing but exception. When runtime error is getting in the application, that means this may cause abnormal termination of program execution. This may cause what? Abnormal termination of program execution. Program execution will not go in normal way, so it will not successfully execute. So why? Because runtime error or exception is there. So this may cause abnormal termination of program execution. So to avoid this, to overcome this, when the exception is raised or runtime error is raised inside the application, so we need to solve that exception. We need to handle that exception. To handle that exception, we have exception handling mechanisms. First mechanism is logical implementation. Second one is try-catch implementation. So these are the exception mechanism implementations are there. Using this implementation, we will solve this exception or runtime error. So in real time, in general, most of the programmers will give first importance to the logical implementation only. That means when we get runtime error or exceptions, first preference we should give to logical implementation. Then if in case any exception or runtime error is not possible to solve using logical implementation, then we can go for try-catch implementation. Okay, right. So first I would like to show that in what cases we may get exception and what type of exceptions we may get, how to solve that, how to handle that exception, we will discuss in programmatic part. Okay, right. So let me show first of all one example with the logical implementation, how to solve exception using logical statements. I will show. First, flip to Visual Studio environment and click on project menu, add class. I would like to add one class. So for example, CLS exception, meaningful name I am giving just. Okay, right. So you can take static void main here, svm, then int a and b and c, three variables I have taken. Okay, then after that just I am asking console.writeLine, enter two numbers. Enter two numbers. A value we have to give at running time, but you know that a value is integer type. At the runtime, if you give a value integer type, then application by default it will be treated as string. So you would like to convert that string value to integer, then we should use convert.toInt or int.parse method. So convert.toInt to 32 of console.readLine. Console.readLine, then b equal to convert dot, wait a minute, b, second number also we have to give convert dot 2 into 32 of console.readLine, and c equal to a plus b here, otherwise we'll go with a divided by b. So console.writeLine, then division will be result as quotient is plus c here. Okay, then to stay back to our screen, console.read method, that's all. So this is very simple program here. So in this program we may get runtime error here. Okay, what type of error? Runtime error, that is exception we may get. So how do we get? You can see Solution Explorer, properties, let me expand this, CLS exception here I am taking. So our class name is CLS exception. Click on save and run the application. You can check out here. So first enter two numbers it is asking. If we enter first number, for example 50, second number 50, then quotient is fine here, one value. Okay, then let me show that if I am going to first number 0 and second number 50, 0 by something is 0 here, it's okay. In this case not at all problem. So now you can see when I am going to give first number is 50 and second number is 0. So something is divided by 0 is infinity, and in this case we may get an exception, that is attempted to divide by 0 exception. To handle this exception, so this is abnormal termination of program execution. So suddenly it is going to be terminated, here it is not going to be executed, another exception is raised. Divide by 0 exception was unhandled, we have to handle. How to handle this exception? So first of all you should prefer to logical statement. As I told that to handle the exception, so we have exception handling mechanisms. One is logical implementation, next one is try catch implementation. So here these two are exception handling mechanism. Let's solve this using logical statements. How I am going to solve logical statement? You can see after b, here I am taking if b equal to 0, open and close. Then here I am writing console.writeLine, then if user is entering second number is 0, then I should give the value like second number can't be 0, I should provide second number can't be 0. In else part, else open, and here we have to produce this same thing, c equal to a divided by b, console.writeLine, quotient is plus c. If b equal to 0 means second number cannot be 0, we have to produce. If b is not equal to 0 means something is value given by programmer, that is else part it should go, that is c equal to a by b and console.writeLine, quotient is plus c. So as it is. Now you can see when I am going to start the execution part, enter two numbers, then 50 and 0 I am giving. So immediately else part is coming, second number cannot be 0. Okay, right. So now you can see this is the way to solve handle the exception using logical statement. This is logical implementation. Next we will go for try catch implementation. Okay, So how do we implement try catch implementation? But before that, let me give syntax of try catch implementation. First I will give syntax of try catch implementation. Syntax. So you can see try block. Okay, so you can write the statements here whatever you want, and catch block. Here also we can write the statements, and finally block. Statements, these are. So here this is try statements, catch statements, finally statements. Okay, this is the syntax of try catch implementation. When we implement this try catch implementation, first control is jumps into try block. In this try block, in these statements, any exception or runtime error is there, immediately try block is ignored. So control is jump into catch block, then catch block is execute, then after that control is jump into finally block, then finally is execute. Okay, when exception is raised in try block is ignore, catch block is execute, finally block is execute. Suppose in try block there is no exception or runtime error, code is everything fine. So try block is execute, catch block is ignore, finally is execute. Okay, if any no exception is available in try block, then try block is simply execute, and next catch block is ignore, and finally block is going to be execute now. Okay, right. So here finally block is compulsory is executing, whether that is exception is raised in try block or not. So irrespective of exception raised in try block, then finally is compulsory is executing, because so if we include finally block in try catch implementation, that should be execute compulsory, because including finally block is optional. If you are not including, it won't be run. If including, it must and should run. Okay, right. So let's see practical implementation of try catch implementation. Same thing. For that, let me add class here. I am adding class. Class name is CLS exception 1. CLS exception 1. Now you can see I am taking static void main. Then here in try block only I am taking total implementation logic part. So int a and b and c. Okay, then whatever I am taking total implementation I am taking here, a equal to convert dot 2 into 32 of console dot read line, b equal to convert dot 2 into 32 of console dot read line, c equal to a division by b, then console dot write line quotient is plus c here. Okay, right. Try block is over. Total code I implemented in try block. Let me go with catch block. In catch block, what I am writing, you can see any error is occurred, then we are going to display error is occurred. Error occurred. Then finally I am including, you can see finally, including finally block is optional, then if include it will be execute. Code is executed like that. I would like to show that. This is simple. Finally, to stay back to our screen, console dot read here. Console dot read. Okay, right. It's very simple here. I have implemented total logic part in what block? Try block. Control, first of all, it will jumps into try block. When try block is any syntactical error or else any exception runtime error, immediately it ignore and it jump into catch block and finally also execute. So in try block code there is no exception, simply try block is execute and catch block is ignore, finally block is execute. So let's see practically. Let me change the startup object for executing that CLS exception 1. Now you can see when I am going to do that, you can see clearly. So we have not written some enter any number like that, so that's what it is not showing here. Let me add some statement, console dot write line, enter 2 numbers, enter 2 numbers. Then let's start the execution. So as usual it is asking here, so 50 divided by 0, it won't be execute because we raise an attempted to divide by 0 exception. So when exception is raised, try block is ignored, simply catch block is execute. In catch block what we have written, error occurred, code is executed in finally block. Okay, it's very clear. And for example, you can see when I am not going to raise an error, one if application is not having any exception, okay, 50 and 50 no exception, it's very clear, and try block is here executing and finally is executing, but catch block is simply ignored. Quotient is 1 and code is executed. It is very simple. So now you can see in this case, whenever I am going to give 60 or 0, error is occurred, code is executed, it is showing. But actually we raised what type of exception? Attempted to divide by 0 exception. We raised divided by 0 exception, but it is not producing any relevant information according to the error. Okay, so only error occurred, what we have written hard code here, error occurred, code executed is showing in this case. But next time whenever I am going to give, suppose input is wrong, some characters I am entering here. So even though when I am going to enter some characters, this is different exception, input string was not correct in format, actually format exception it is, but though this is format exception, again we are producing what, same error message, error occurred, code is executed. In both cases like this same, what type of exception is raised, so same error message we are producing. Okay, same error message we are producing. So that is what here programmer cannot identify easily what type of exception it raises in the application. So that's what, to avoid this we need to use a specific catch block. So I will give that clearly. Catch blocks can be of two different types. Okay, so catch block can be of two different types. One is what? Generic catch block, generic catch block, and next one is specific catch block, specific catch block. Okay, right. Generic catch block means what here? Without exception class is called generic catch block. Without exception class is called generic catch block. This is generic catch block. So without exception class means what? Here you can see this is catch block, open, close. Here I have written console dot write line. So what we a given error message, that is only it is producing everything every time. This is generic catch block. Then specific catch block means what here? Catch block with exception class. Specific catch block means catch block with exception class is called specific catch block. Specific catch block. Okay, that means how it will be specific catch block? Catch, open, here exception is a class. Okay, ex is its object. Ex means object, any name you can take, ex is not required. Okay, every time exception is a class, ex is message. Then console dot write line ex dot message, ex dot message. So in this case what happened here? Exception is there. This exception is super class of exception. It will taking care about all subclass of exceptions like attempted to divide by 0, format exception, null reference exception, arithmetic exception, member access exception, method access exception. So many exceptions are there. Okay, so that can be handled by super class of exception, that is exception. Exception is a super class of exception and ex is a message, ex is object for the exception. So you have to use specific catch block. Let me use specific catch block to proper message to display to the user. So that's what exception ex. Exception is a super class, ex is a object. So through object I am going to display message. So how do you know that whether what type of exception means? Whenever inside the program any exception is raised, that will check out internally super class of exception. So it can be find out its subclass of exception message and it will give it to that object through we got that proper message, you can see. So now you can see when I am going to run, so intentionally I am raising that attempted to divide by 0 exception. So attempted to divide by 0. So did I provide anywhere in my program attempted to divide by 0? No. So how it is coming, because it will go and it will cross verified in superclass of exception, it will prepare the message for the user through object. It will display ex.message attempted to divide by 0. It is very clear. In this case, user is getting clear information what type of exception is raised. And otherwise, for example, if I am going to raise a format exception, first number and second number something here, so input string was not correct in format. This also I didn't give in the program. So input string was not correct in format text. It is coming again through exception classes. Okay, right. So you may get here, every time you need not to use superclass of exception also, but when we are going to know that what type of exception is raised in the program, you may use multiple catch blocks also like this. For example, divide by 0 exception is one catch block, and other catch block also I would like to take. So format exception also another catch block. So like this. So if we do like this, what's happened here? What is the advantage? So it is, if it is simple here, so what type of exception is raised, that catch block only will be executed directly. It points to that subclass of exception. But if you use superclass of exception and exception superclass of exception, it should check internally what type of exception is raising, that class related to message it should be happen. So that is better to use when we know the error. Here multiple catch blocks can be used, that is the better option. So for example, divide by 0 exception is raising, so what catch block is executing now? So here divide by 0 exception is only coming here, but simply that second catch block format exception which will be not highlighting and it will not be executed. For example, let me execute again. Whenever I am going to give format exception, if you can see the format exception catch block only is executing, so divide by 0 exception catch block is simply ignored. So it will be fine here without rechecking under that superclass of exception, it will be better. Okay. So this is the simple way to explaining that what it is exceptions in C#.NET. So these are the different types of errors, and ultimately what we can say, exception is nothing but what? Runtime error. Okay. So that's all about exceptions.